What if the most feared name on the field was also the most hated man in the history of the sport? Not feared the way people feared Babe Ruth, where the fear came wrapped in awe, in joy, in the electric hope that you might witness something impossible. No, this was a different kind of fear. The kind that made grown men, professional athletes, genuinely not want to share a field with one person. The kind that made opponents file their spikes sharp before a game. The kind that made managers pull their players aside before a series and say, "Watch yourself out there. That man will hurt you, and he won't feel bad about it." That man was Ty Cobb. And this is his real story. I've been thinking about how to tell this one for a long time, because Ty Cobb is genuinely one of the most complicated figures I've ever dug into. And I've spent a lot of time in the rabbit holes of sports, history, staying up too late, watching old game footage, and reading biographies that most people my age would never touch. Cobb is the kind of subject that makes you uncomfortable. He forces you to hold two things in your head at the same time that don't want to coexist. The idea that someone can be historically, statistically, objectively the greatest hitter who ever lived, and also a man defined by cruelty, racism, and a rage so consuming it destroyed almost every relationship he ever had. You don't get to pick one version of Ty Cobb. You have to take the whole thing. Tyrus Raymond Cobb was born on December 18th, 1886, in Narrows, Georgia. The son of William Herschel Cobb, a school teacher, local politician, and, by all accounts, one of the most respected men in his community. His father was the dominant force in his life, and I mean that in every sense. William Cobb had enormous expectations for his son. Not baseball expectations, intellectual ones. He wanted Tyrus to become a doctor, a lawyer, a military man, someone who would carry the Cobb name into prominence. Baseball was not part of that vision. Baseball was, in William Cobb's estimation, a frivolous pursuit unworthy of a serious man. When Tyrus was 17, he told his father he wanted to pursue professional baseball. His father's response was not rage. It was something colder and more lasting than rage. William Cobb told his son, "Go then. Go and prove you're worth something." And that conditional, withholding approval, "Go prove it," became the engine that drove Ty Cobb for the rest of his career. Every hit, every stolen base, every opponent he spiked sliding into second. He was proving something to a man who could no longer tell him whether it was enough. Because in August 1905, while Ty Cobb was away playing minor league baseball in Augusta, Georgia, his mother Amanda shot and killed his father. She claimed she mistook him for a burglar, climbing through the window late at night. William Cobb died from the gunshot wound. Amanda Cobb was tried for manslaughter and acquitted. Ty Cobb was 18 years old. He never fully recovered from it. By most accounts of people who knew him, he never talked about it, not directly, not honestly. But it was there in everything he did on a baseball field for the next 24 years. Think about what that does to a person. Your father, the man whose approval you are chasing across minor league baseball fields in Georgia, is killed by your mother before he ever gets to. See, you become what you were trying to become for him. The unresolved need for that approval doesn't disappear. It has nowhere to go, so it turns inward, and then it turns outward, onto every opponent, every umpire, every teammate who looked at Ty Cobb sideways. The grief became fury. The Fury became the most ferocious competitive drive professional baseball had ever seen. He was called up to the Detroit Tigers in August 1905, the same month his father died. He was 18 years old. He was not welcomed. Veteran players on the Tigers made a habit of hazing rookies, and Cobb, sensitive, volatile, grieving in a way he couldn't articulate, was a perfect target. They broke his bats. They nailed his shoes to the floor. They locked him out of the batting cage during practice. A different kind of person might have endured it quietly or found a way to deflect it with humor. Cobb responded by becoming someone that nobody wanted to provoke. He fought teammates with his fists. He kept a pistol in his locker. The hazing stopped because the players genuinely became afraid of what he might do. By 1907, at 20 years old, Cobb won his first American League batting title with a .350 average. He would win 12 batting titles in the next 13 years. 12. His career batting average of .366 is the highest in the history of Major League Baseball and has not been seriously threatened since he retired in 1928. In 1911, he hit .420. In 1912, he hit .409. Back-to-back seasons above 400. In a sport where hitting 300 makes you a solid professional and hitting .350 makes you exceptional, Ty Cobb was operating at a level that had no real precedent and has had no real successor. I remember the first time I actually sat down and went through Cobb's career numbers seriously. I was in college, writing a paper on the dead ball era, and I pulled up his baseball reference page and just stared at it. The consistency is what gets you. It's not one or two transcendent seasons surrounded by solid ones. It's 24 years of elite production. What kind of person sustains that? What is burning inside someone that keeps that competitive furnace running for 2.5 decades? The answer, from everything I've read, is that the furnace was fueled by something that never got resolved. He was never playing for the joy of the game. He was playing for something older and darker and more personal than joy. On the field, Cobb's approach was unlike anything his contemporaries had seen. He was not a power hitter. He deliberately choked up on the bat, split his hands on the grip to give himself maximum bat control, and hit to all fields with a precision that was almost surgical. He studied pitchers obsessively, keeping mental notes on every pitcher's tendencies, patterns, tells. He would deliberately work counts to get the pitch he wanted in the location he wanted, and then place the ball with what witnesses described as almost contemptuous accuracy. He didn't try to overpower pitchers. He outsmarted them, and then he made them feel stupid for being outsmarted. The base running was something else entirely. Cobb stole 897 bases in his career, a record that stood until Lou Brock broke it in 1977. But the number alone doesn't capture what Cobb was doing on the base paths. He wasn't stealing bases to accumulate a statistic. He was stealing bases to destabilize pitchers, to unsettle defenses, to impose his will on the psychological state of everyone else on the field. Cobb had made himself the most disruptive presence on the field without even having the bat in his hands. And then there were the spikes. Cobb slid into bases with his cleats raised. This is documented. Multiple accounts, multiple witnesses, multiple opponents with scars to show for it. He would file his spikes sharp before games. Infielders knew it. They knew that turning a double play with Cobb running meant risking a gash across the shin or the thigh or the hand. Some of them moved out of the way. That was the point. He was playing a psychological game that extended well beyond any single at-bat. There's a story from 1909 that gets told a lot in baseball history circles. He was on first base and he shouted to the opposing third baseman, "Home run Baker," one of the best players in the league, that he was going to steal second, then third, then come home. And then he did exactly that. 3 stolen bases on 3 consecutive pitches. Baker reportedly stood at third, watching Cobb score, and couldn't say a word. Cobb hadn't just outrun them. He had told them what he was going to do, dared them to stop it, and then done it anyway. That kind of arrogance, in that quantity, directed at that many people, consistently for that many years. It doesn't come from confidence alone. It comes from rage. Off the field, the picture gets darker. His racism was not incidental. It was structural to his worldview and expressed itself in ways that went well beyond the casual bigotry that was, depressingly, common in early 20th century America. He was violent. He was paranoid. He had physical altercations throughout his career, with opponents, with umpires, with fans. He went into the stands in New York in 1912 to assault a heckler who had lost fingers in an industrial accident, meaning the man literally could not defend himself. And Cobb beat him anyway while teammates and stadium staff tried to pull him off. His own teammates, for most of his career, did not like him. Sam Crawford, who played alongside Cobb in Detroit for years, said in later life that Cobb didn't have any friends, that nobody on the team really wanted to be around him, that he was always fighting, always suspicious, always certain that someone was out to get him. I walked through the old Tiger Stadium site in Detroit a few years back. It's a vacant lot now, mostly. There's nothing there that looks like what it was. And I stood there thinking about Cobb, playing there for 22 seasons, the crowd in those wooden grandstands, watching this singular, vicious, extraordinary athlete do things that nobody else could do, and hating him for how he did them even as they couldn't look away. Detroit loved his production and kept a careful distance from the man producing it. That's a strange kind of relationship between a city and its star. But with Cobb, it was the only kind available. He retired in 1928 with records that seemed simply permanent. Most career hits, 4,189. Highest career batting average, .366. Most career stolen bases, 897. Most batting titles, 12. When the first Baseball Hall of Fame vote was held in 1936, Cobb received votes on 222 of 226 ballots, more than Babe Ruth, more than anyone. The writers who covered baseball for their entire careers voted Cobb the greatest player in the history of the game. Not the most beloved, not the most fun to watch, the greatest. His final years were genuinely sad in a way that feels almost biblical in its completeness. He had made a fortune investing in Coca-Cola and General Motors stock early and died, one of the wealthiest former athletes in America. But the money was company he sat with alone. His children were estranged. His second marriage had failed. The few people who came to visit him in his final years in Atherton, California, described a man surrounded by guns, whiskey, and bitterness, still fighting battles that had ended decades ago. When he died on July 17th, 1961. At the age of 74, fewer than a dozen people attended his funeral. 3 of them were from baseball. The man who received votes on 222 of 226 Hall of Fame ballots. The man with the highest batting average in the history of the sport. Fewer than 12 people at the funeral. I don't know what the clean lesson is in Ty Cobb's story. I've thought about it a lot, and I'm not sure there is one. With Babe Ruth, you can find the through line. The abandoned kid who channeled his hunger into greatness and was, beneath the excess, capable of genuine warmth. With Cobb, the through line is harder to hold. The grief over his father, the rage it produced, the talent it fueled, the destruction it caused. It's all connected. But the connection doesn't resolve into something comfortable. Some lives don't. Ty Cobb is proof that greatness and goodness are not the same thing, and that the qualities that produce one can actively destroy the other. He was the greatest hitter who ever lived. He was also a man who died essentially alone, because he treated people the way he treated opposing infielders, as obstacles to be overcome, threats to be neutralized, problems to be solved before they could slow him down. On a baseball field, that approach produced .366 over 24 years. In a life, it produced an empty room at the end of it. Both of those things are true, and you have to hold both of them at the same time to understand who Ty Cobb actually was. If this kind of deep dive is what you're here for, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments who you want me to go into next. I'll see you in the next one.